No one falls apart by accident. Every ruin begins with a cowardly silence. People don't break all at once. You broke the 1,000th time you said I'm fine, when you let one more humiliation slide, one more abuse dressed up as a mature relationship, one more demand disguised as empathy. You thought swallowing your pain was a sign of balance, that enduring was a virtue, but that was just the beginning of the end. Because every time you stayed silent to keep the peace, it was another wound you chose not to treat. And now, here you are, destroyed on the inside, whole on the outside, acting strong but one drop away from turning to dust. You didn't lose yourself because no one supported you. You lost yourself because you accepted too much, stayed quiet too often, gave in too many times. And now you're paying the same price every man pays when he chooses to be peaceful, in a world that rewards the loudest and most destructive. Your downfall was signed by the silence you mistook for maturity. So now deal with the cracks in the statue, or break it all at once and start speaking, even if it's late. There's a kind of silence that looks noble, a silence dressed up as self-control, emotional wisdom, respect. People praise it, romanticize it, even admire it. But what most don't realize is that this kind of silence often isn't born from peace, it's born from fear. Fear of confrontation, fear of being a burden, fear of losing someone or something. And when that fear hides behind the mask of maturity, it becomes a psychological trap. You think you're being strong, but deep down, you're just dissolving. That kind of silence isn't growth, it's suppression dressed as virtue. How many times have you stayed quiet thinking you were avoiding a fight, when really you were avoiding your own truth? It's easy to confuse self-mastery with self-erasure, especially in a world that rewards people for being balanced, mature, and emotionally evolved. But there's a huge difference between being calm and being passive. One comes from inner strength. The other is a sign of self-betrayal. When you start keeping quiet just to avoid losing someone, you slowly start losing yourself. And the worst part, you begin to take pride in that silence, like it's some kind of moral high ground. Carl Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And the truth is, a lot of people confuse maturity with denying that darkness. They choose silence because they're scared of what might come out if they speak. Hurt, anger, shame, rejection. But everything you avoid feeling just grows stronger in the dark. Silence doesn't heal anything. It just delays the pain. And eventually, that so-called mature silence turns into emotional collapse. No one understands why, because what looked like strength was just fear pretending to be balance. Emotional breakdowns rarely happen all at once. Most people don't even notice when they start falling apart, because the pain at first is subtle, almost invisible. It doesn't show up as a scream, but as a muffled sigh, a quiet "never mind," a glance that looks away, a tear held back in a bathroom stall. That's how ruin begins, when small emotional wounds are ignored in the name of stability, when the things that should be faced are constantly postponed, and with every repetition, collapse quietly builds. It's in this silent ground that the soul slowly wears down. What once felt like a passing discomfort turns into a permanent state of emotional survival. You keep functioning on the outside, but you're emotionally numb on the inside. And when pain starts piling up, it stops being a warning and becomes your identity. You forget who you were before you shut down, before you accepted, before you swallowed it all. And the cruelest part? You start thinking this is just normal, that this emptiness, this numbness, this fog, is just part of being an adult. Pierre Weil called it normosis, the pathology of normality. When living by sick standards is seen as healthy, when swallowing humiliation and erasing your own boundaries is labeled as maturity. Normosis turns silent suffering into socially acceptable behavior. It creates emotionally amputated adults who smile in meetings but fall apart in silence after midnight. And the worst part? The process is so gradual that by the time you notice, you're already cracked wide open inside, and no one sees it. There's this image society loves to sell, the strong one, the resilient one, the one who keeps it all in and just powers through. It's like this invisible trophy. The more you endure, the more respectable you seem. But that's not strength, that's emotional numbness. The fantasy of strength taught us that crying is weakness, speaking up is losing control, and showing pain is a sign of fragility. And because of that, we've built a culture where silent suffering is seen as a virtue. A culture where surviving is praised more than actually living. Little by little, you start to believe that being strong means pushing through, even when every part of you is begging to stop. So you keep going. You work. You fake a smile. You laugh when people expect you to. You say, "I'm good," because that's what they want to hear. But inside, everything's falling apart. The fantasy of strength turns people into statues, beautiful on the outside, hollow on the inside. And the worst part? Those statues get praised. They get promotions. They're admired. No one sees they're crumbling from the inside out, because they've been trained to hide their pain like it's classified information. This hits men especially hard. From a young age, many are taught that feeling is failure, that showing pain is opening the door for the world to crush you. And that's when the wound gets deeper. People start taking pride in their armor, but every shell that's too hard eventually cracks. Every bit of emotional rigidity is a ticking time bomb. And when it explodes, it doesn't just break the person. It wrecks relationships, identities, lives. Real strength isn't pretending you're fine. It's having the guts to feel, to speak, and to rebuild from the wreckage. Every time you hold back just to keep the peace, a piece of you gets left behind. At first, it seems harmless. You let go of one opinion here, ignore a gut feeling there, tolerate something that hurts because you don't want to cause trouble. But when that pattern repeats itself over and over, it starts building a kind of emotional amputation. You begin drifting away from your own truth. Your intuition screams, but you mute it. What started as empathy slowly turns into self-abandonment, and over time, you can't even tell if you're being kind or just disappearing. Self-erasure is like a slow suicide of the self. It turns you into a reflection of what the world wants, not who you truly are. You start living based on other people's needs, their expectations, their desires that were never yours. And the scariest part? The process is so subtle that you only notice it when everything loses flavor. Food, sex, friendships, life. You're there, but you're not really there. Because living as someone else drains you more than living as yourself. And eventually, your body starts charging you for everything your soul's been swallowing for years. That's when the symptoms show up. Anxiety that comes out of nowhere, deep apathy, insomnia, existential dread, psychosomatic illnesses. Your body screams what your mouth never dared to say. And the saddest part? Most people around you won't even notice, because people who erase themselves get really good at wearing masks. They smile, work, crack jokes. But inside, they're drowning, because anyone who stays silent just to keep a bond eventually breaks. And the price you pay for that so-called peace? It's way too high. It's losing yourself. There comes a point where silence no longer protects you. It suffocates you. Where the armor you've been wearing weighs more than any external battle. Where keeping up appearances becomes more painful than facing your inner chaos. That moment is lonely, non-transferable, and brutal. It's when the cracks can no longer be hidden behind a smile, productivity, or spiritual talk. It's when your body, your mind, and your soul all hit a wall, and you're faced with an unavoidable decision: keep pretending or finally break. And sometimes, breaking is the only way to be reborn. Breaking, as painful as it is also a form of truth. It rips through the layers that were suffocating you and forces you to face who you've actually become. And only from there can real healing begin. The pain stops being a symptom and turns into a doorway. Speak, even if your voice shakes. Scream, even if no one's listening. Let out everything you've been swallowing for years. That isn't rebellion, that's rescue. It's the return to your center, to who you were before you learned to stay quiet, before you became what everyone else wanted you to be. Not everyone is ready for that confrontation. Many will choose to keep silently falling apart, because even collapse, as destructive as it is, still feels safer than the unknown of rebuilding. But the ones who dare to truly break, the ones who finally say, "I can't do this anymore," they're the ones who start to get free. Because no one heals while holding on to lies. Healing requires a reckoning, a tearing, an unmasking. And maybe real maturity lives right there, not in holding everything in, but in knowing when to finally let go, to stop carrying the weight of the world and start carrying yourself. Maybe deep down, everything this video has tried to say comes down to one thing. Staying silent about your pain isn't wisdom. It's sacrifice disguised as self-control. And behind every person who seems too strong might be a soul completely drained from trying to hold the world together at the cost of themselves. The biggest trap of misunderstood maturity is believing that silence protects you, when in truth it traps you. And the worst part? This prison doesn't always have visible bars. It's built from small invisible things, forced silences, fake smiles, ignored boundaries, day after day. You don't need to be screaming to be asking for help. Sometimes, the cry for help hides in an empty stare, in your disconnect from what used to matter, in a kind of tiredness that no vacation can fix. And if there's one thing you can do right now, after everything you've just heard, it's to look at yourself with brutal honesty. No emotional makeup, no pretending to be okay for people who don't live your life. Maybe the bravest thing you can do today isn't to keep pushing, but to finally stop, to release, to speak, to question, to face yourself. Because no one changes what they're still pretending to accept. Now I want to leave you with a question, but answer it with brutal honesty. Where in your life are you still staying quiet just so you won't be rejected? The answer might not come right away, but when it does, it might change everything. And if this message hits something deep inside you, then help it reach someone else who needs to hear it too. There are people right now on the edge of collapse, and maybe this video is the one thing that could stop them from falling in silence. Leave a like, because that helps YouTube show this to more people. Drop a comment below. What part hit you the hardest? Your words might help someone else see themselves too. Subscribe and hit the bell, because the next videos are going to keep breaking down these invisible walls we were taught to build since we were kids. You're not alone, but you've got to start speaking.